We'll get Gary's.
Good evening. Welcome to this April 19th, 2021 meeting of the Norfolk City Council. We'll call the meeting to order, and to begin, we'll call your attention to the Open Meetings Act posted here in the council chambers. If you now please join me in rising for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Granquist?
Here.
Arns? Here. Merrill?
Here.
Woolhouse?
Here.
Murin?
Here.
Jackson?
Here.
Boston?
Here.
Hildebrand?
Here.
With that, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move. Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Would entertain a motion to approve the full agenda.
So move. Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
Okay. That takes us to item number 24 on the council agenda under special presentations. And this is a proclamation for Thursday, April 22nd, 2021 as Earth Day. I will read the proclamation. Whereas the first Earth Day was celebrated on April 22nd, 1970, and Earth Day originated in the U.S. and became recognized worldwide by 1990. And every year on April 22nd, men, women, and children participate in environmental stewardship activities such as stream cleanup, planting trees, educational events, celebrating sustainable accomplishments, and more. And environmental education, resource conservation, waste reduction, and environmental protection are imperative to a sustainable future. And it is understood that sustainability will only be achieved by considering the triple bottom line: the environment, the people, and the economy. And the observance of Earth Day will highlight and focus our attention on reducing our own environmental footprint. And Earth Day is a day celebrated around the globe to remind us all to do our part to protect the earth for future generations. Now, therefore, I, Josh Moaning, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim April 22nd, 2021 as Earth Day in the City of Norfolk, and urge all citizens to implement practices designed to preserve and protect our environment and shape the future of our environmental security. I believe there's someone here tonight to receive the proclamation. I believe a representative from Earth Fiber. Green Fiber. What's your name?
Alex.
Alex?
Yep.
Very good. Do you want to say a few words about what Green Fiber does within the community to
Yep.
promote recycling? Okay,
Yep.
very well.
All right, so green fiber, a little bit about green fiber. We started, we manufacture cellulose insulation made out of 85% recycled paper and cardboard. In 2006, we started our paper recycling program that reaches a 60-mile radius of the Norfolk area, and we have over 350 green bins that collects all that recycled material. And we currently recycle 200 tons of paper and cardboard every month from the 60-mile radius. It's a completely free service. We pick up over 450 bins every week. And we also give back to our community, so we actually pay the customers for the material that they do recycle. So if you guys have any questions, I'm always around. You can always
Very
give me a
good.
call, Facebook page, whatever works.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate you being here. How many sites within Norfolk itself? You said 300 bins.
We have
in the area?
350 bins in Norfolk itself. I don't exactly know, but I think we have about 60% of the bins in Norfolk.
Okay.
Every school and church has one, and those are probably the easiest places to list off.
Well, you've made paper recycling very accessible to
Yep.
people here, and we appreciate those efforts.
Thank you.
Moving along, we go to public hearings and related action. Item number 25. I will open a public hearing to consider an amendment to the City Code to enact Chapter 13, Article 16 of the City Code to regulate sexually oriented businesses and permits and business regulations, to amend Section 27-2 of the City Code to delete the definition for adult entertainment businesses and amend the definition for massage parlor, to repeal Section 27-285 of the City Code addressing adult entertainment uses, to amend Section 27-289 to change a current reference to adult entertainment businesses, to enact Chapter 27, Article 14 to regulate sexually oriented businesses in the zoning code. And to kick off this public hearing and give us some background, I'll look to Val Grimes, our city planner. Val.
Thank you. This code before you tonight is an update to code because we discovered that the code that is currently in place is almost 20 years old. And so what we did was we looked at other first-class cities and how they regulated this, which is how we came to be adding a licensure in city limits. That is the Chapter 13 section of it. However, we do have a section that is in zoning code, which means that covers the city limits and the extraterritorial jurisdiction. We do not licensure outside of the city limits. That's what we're proposing because there is some police work that goes along with the licensure, and they are authorized inside city limits. But we do have some items in the zoning code that pertains to all of jurisdiction, like certain 500 feet away from schools and items like that, and 1,000 feet away from anything like children, daycares, I believe, and such things. If there are any specific questions, we can certainly go through the code if you have them.
Okay, thank you, Val. Any questions for Val? This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so now. And Val, just for a little further background, we are taking a look at this now. You said existing city code is more than 20 years old, and we found that we wanted to update a few things and modernize what we have on the books. Is that correct?
Correct. It did not have a lot of specificity in it from 20 years ago, and that what we put before you today is more in line with what other first-class cities have, and they go into more specific items, just for a little more definition.
Okay. Again, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishes to comment, they can do so now. Hearing and seeing no one, I will ask for a planning commission report, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 6, 2021 to consider amendments to the official city code in chapters 13 and 27 related to sexually oriented businesses. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the amendments with an 8-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing and move to item 26. I'd look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5727, amending the city code to enact chapter 13, article 16 of the code to regulate sexually oriented businesses and permits and business regulations, to amend section 27-2 of the city code to delete the definition for adult entertainment businesses and amend the definition for massage parlor, to repeal 27-285 of the city code addressing adult entertainment uses, to amend section 27-289 to change a current reference to adult entertainment businesses, to enact chapter 27, article 14 to regulate sexually oriented businesses in the zoning code.
Your Honor, go ahead, Fred. Your Honor, I'd move for consideration of ordinance number 5727. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on this, council, or questions for staff? And again, Val, I've had this question. So these updates would not impact existing businesses, correct?
Correct.
And essentially, we, as I look at the ordinance in summary, again, for public record here, are establishing parameters for which businesses of this sort can be permitted within the city via our zoning code, but requiring some distance setbacks from areas where families with children typically gather, so schools, daycares, and churches. Is that summary accurate, Val? Anything to add to that?
That's a good summary. Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to enact Chapter 13, Article 16 of the official city code to regulate sexually oriented businesses and permits and business regulations, to amend Section 27-2 of the code to delete the definition for adult entertainment businesses and amend the definition for massage parlor, to repeal Section 27-285 of the code addressing adult entertainment uses, to amend Section 27-289 to change a current reference to adult entertainment businesses, to enact Chapter 27, Article 14 to regulate sexually oriented businesses in the zoning code, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, with that, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5727 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, since this looks like more of a cleanup ordinance and I see no opposition, I'll make a motion that we suspend the rules and pass this on second and third.
Second that.
Motion second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5727 carries on second and third.
Okay. Moving to item number 27, I will open a public hearing to consider a request from Warren Hale for a zoning change from C1 Local Business District to R2 1 and 2 Family Residential District on property addressed as 212 South 8th Street. And to kick off this hearing, again, Val Grimes, City Planner.
Thank you. This zoning request came through. This is actually the person's home, and it is next to an empty lot that is at Phillip and 8th. That lot, it appears years ago, had a house that was demoed, and somebody had the intention of putting a house back up, and so they zone changed that one lot to R2, and nothing has ever been built on it. What the intention was told to me was to zone change the non-conforming house from C1 to R2 so that both the house and the vacant lot would be the same zoning, for the people who own the house to put a garage up on the vacant lot. This half of a block is C1, even though there are some houses there, probably because at some point the city zone changed that because it's across the street from I-1 zoning, which is why I would assume that it's C1 non-conforming currently.
Thank you, Val. Any questions? This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to comment could do so now.
You said they wanted to do what with the lot to the south of it now?
They would like to, if this passes, then they would like to combine the two lots and put a garage on the vacant lot.
I was just walking down in that neighborhood yesterday, and you're right, it is somewhat strange that that commercial designation was ever put there. It is surrounded by other residential at this point. Any other comments? Hearing none, Planning Commission report, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 6, 2021, at the request of Warren Hale to consider a zoning change from C1, Local Business District, to R2, 1 and 2 Family Residential District, on property addressed as 212 South 8th Street. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the request with an 8-0 vote.
Okay, we'll close the hearing and move to item number 28. I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5728, approving a zoning change from C1 to R2 on property addressed as 212 South 8th Street.
I'd offer consideration of ordinance number 5728. Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion of this, council? Hearing none. Short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance number 5728 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, again, seeing no opposition to this, and seems to be more of a cleanup issue again, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5728 on second and third.
Motion second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance number 5728 carries on second and third.
Okay, item 29. I will open this public hearing at the request of Virginia Rosh to consider a zoning change from A, Agricultural District, to RR, Rural Residential District, on property generally located a quarter-mile east of the intersection of North 49th Street and West Eisenhower Avenue. And to once again kick off the public hearing, give some background, Val Grimes, City Planner.
Thank you. This zone change before you tonight, it's in the northwest section of town. I did put the map up with it highlighted in red, so you can kind of see where it is in relation to the other R1 zoning that we have at the edge of town. One thing to do mention that there are opposition letters as part of the agenda packet, and due to this being a 20% opposition with those letters, because we needed 3 opposition letters to get that 20%. This will need to pass on 6 votes tonight instead of the usual 5. And also to let you know that the plat that goes along with it is after this. We are talking about the zone change right now, but if the zone change does not pass on all 3 readings tonight, then the plat will not be discussed, and we need to pull that off because the plat can't be approved until the zone change is fully approved. So just to let you know that we may have some things adjusted on the agenda if this does not pass on all 3 readings. The general layout is they want to go from ag to RR, rural residential. Rural residential can, by zoning code, go down to 1 acre. However, the minimum lot size, because these are going to be on septics and wells, is 3 acres by the state. And so there is a plan with the plat to have 3 to 5 acre lots. So that is the reason for the RR zoning tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Val. Any questions for Val? This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so now. And I will note, as we do with public hearings, that for everyone to have a chance to be heard, we will limit testimony to 5 minutes, and Brianna will be keeping time.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Karmazine. I'm going to hand these to the city clerk here. Basically, this is just a statement that I want to present so that all of you have a reference just to look at. You can disseminate it amongst yourself. First of all, I just want to thank you for letting me appear before you today. This has been kind of a long, 8-month-long process that we've kind of cooperatively worked with the city, and because of the way zoning and planning went, with the first public hearing, we weren't really allowed to address some of the concerns in a public forum until now. So hopefully this statement can kind of attempt to address some of those concerns that were raised in those letters. When I sought out to begin this process of this land, essentially my wife and I wanted an acreage to try and raise our children on. And we knew that citizens within Norfolk were looking for the same thing. So I approached Virginia Rosh and her daughter. Virginia Rosh is my great aunt, about this property and purchasing this property. And then the discussions began with the city on what we could do with it. I know that in reading some of the letters, there are a lot of people concerned about that this does not appear to be something that would be in a rural residential area like this, that it looks like something within the city limits. I don't know of any 3 to 5 acre developments within the city limits. It's a half mile outside the city limits, so we're not 5-8 miles out. We're about as close as we can be to the city limits without actually being inside the city limits. If you look at the housing between 37th and 49th, extending north from Highway 275, a lot of the current housing already exists on 1 to 7 acre lots between Cedar Ridge and Terra Heights, Deer Run, Deer Hollow. There's a small 2-lot subdivision to the southeast corner of this. As far as density and size goes, they're nearly identical. I feel like it's a sensible transition between the 1 1/4 acre properties to the southeast and the 14 to 20 acre properties that are off to the west. Initially, when I proposed this to the city, I had sought out 7 to 10 acre properties, but I don't think, including myself, not realizing where the wellhead protection fell, and that early on in the process we realized that the zoning and planning was more concerned with getting a higher density in that area. So that was where the initial 7 to 10 that I initially proposed got pulled back to a 3 to 5 because I think the city was concerned with getting as much density in that area as they could as Norfolk kind of moves that direction. And I understand that concern. I know a lot of the residents around there have expressed concerns about the stability of Eisenhower Avenue, and I understand that. I've worked with Madison County Highway Department and the city, and basically they are well aware that that Eisenhower is in disrepair, and that this additional housing is not going to be an advantage to the current road conditions out there. But they're also very cognizant of the fact that additional tax revenue out there might be exactly what's needed to finally get enough revenue to justify some of those repairs that are needed out there. Obviously there's always never a guarantee that anything can or will be done, but the influx of tax revenue is maybe a solution that can lead to some repairs and situations out there.
Stephen, I wanted to let you know we did have 4 minutes.
Okay. I know too that the easement has been a concern. We've never intended to do anything with restricting that access. In fact, the city has insisted that it remain open and functional. So we're going to address the easement, obviously. I can't speak on behalf of the city when it comes to the city water concerns. I know that the city has expressed that they don't have concerns with an additional 22 wells out there. So we can discuss that more too. But I feel like this is a positive thing for that corner of town. I feel like it's good density, but it's not overly dense to the point where it's problematic. So.
And we've hit 5, so if we open up for questions from council.
Thank you, Stephen. Any
Yes.
questions from the council?
Yeah, you got a couple here. Thanks for coming up here. You'd mentioned in your opening statement and also on your application, I'll read this here, about the comprehensive plan, and that's minimal development, but with increased density and compliance with city requests. Care to expound on that a little bit?
Well, again, going back to, I think it's as minimal as a development can be, given the fact that if there were city utilities out there, I don't think there would have been any hesitation to have that there would have been discussions about how small can we make these lots. I think the only thing that's keeping us at 3 to 5 is the fact that they have to be 3 in order to have a well. As far as could it have been more minimal? Yeah, I mean, it probably could have. I mean, you probably could have gotten 7 to 10 acre lots. I just, when I initially proposed that, the concern was, and I think they mentioned it in zoning and planning, was 10 acre lots have kind of gotten us in sticky situations before. So initially when we proposed 7 to 10 acre lots, the reaction was, maybe let's see if we can get some more lots in there. So we obliged, and that's kind of where we met, was in the middle with the city, because from day one, there were conversations with the city, and as far as what can we do, because I wasn't going to be honest, I wasn't going to present something that was, here's what I would like to do, and I'm just gonna go for it, because I knew that was never gonna work. So
Now, about the septic systems that are out there, people long before any of us sitting on here decided for septic in certain parts of the community on the fringes, and then all of a sudden, 40 years later, we're putting sewer in, much to the chagrin of those folks with the septic. But so 22 septic systems. Have you had the soil tested out there? Do you know its permeability? As those thoughts, when I look at city code, you have to
right.
put on your plan where those septic systems are. And then I didn't even realize the wellhead protection was that close. So
Right.
just wondering if you've done any checking on that, and as far as your
I've spoken with some of the well companies around the area. If they have had any concerns with the viability of 22 wells, or just if they have any concerns, their concern was more so water quality and whether or not. Sorry,
I'm not talking about water that you drank. I'm talking about where it goes afterwards in the septic systems.
Oh,
because you have drain fields and everything.
Right.
Like that. Have you had that checked? I mean, that's
No.
22 of them in a small area. That's
right. No,
what I'm thinking
no,
about there. You have.
no.
So we don't even know yet if you would. It's not all soil's the same. That's what I'm
Right,
getting
right.
at.
No, I mean, aside from testing that was done long ago, when it was originally zoned way back when, no.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
In regards to the roads, where are your access points to get into the
On the last page of the handout that I gave you, there is one access point that comes off of Eisenhower, and there is a retention pond that will stay there for runoff. So there was really only one access point in from Eisenhower, right about where Val has her cursor. And then there's an easement off to the west between those two properties. I want to say it's a little over, I think on the plat it says it's about 60.3 feet. So it's adequate width for a road, and phase 1 of the development will all be the eastern half of the property. Phase 2 is the western half, which it's hard to say when we would get to that portion of it. But that easement to the west is the secondary access point to the subdivision. And when discussions were had between the city, essentially they were pleased that it was there, only from the fact that it was a safety concern of only having one entrance in and out. They were, because I had mentioned, do we need that? Do we have to have that? And several people were almost insistent that it stay there as a secondary access point, I think including the fire marshal, just for safety vehicles.
Well, I think that would alleviate some of the wear and tear on Eisenhower if you had another way. You could go
Yeah.
to 49.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks.
This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so now.
Hello, my name's Lynn. I gotta take this off to talk for very long. My name's Lynn Wamsley. I am one of the first houses you will hit from 37th and Eisenhower. I did not receive notification of this because I am off the 300 foot, 300 foot you have to be notified. But word of mouth got around, and talking about agriculture, which this has been agriculture. I've lived in this road 35 years. This is called Penny Hill. And it's because it's a huge hill to the bottom where there is this pasture land here. It has been there since agriculture, definitely. Madison County's, according to the 2017 census, has said Madison County agriculture has decreased already by 12%. And it's going to continue decreasing when we do stuff like this and take away our agriculture, pasture land, whatever. Not every farmer, most farmers rely on pasture land because they have cow calves, they have cattle. They can't supply them all on their own home ground. So I'm huge in agriculture. My daughter, who is an ag teacher, is 5th generation agriculture. So it's very dear to our heart to keep agriculture where it's at. Now in the corner of Eisenhower, he talked about the roads. Yes, it's bad. The last rain we had was awful. Ruts, I had to take a second vehicle. I can't take my little car on this kind of road because it's terrible. 49th, he's talking about the access point. If you go south on 49th, you're hitting minimum maintenance road. That used to be called Gothic Road or something when I was a kid. It hasn't been maintained ever. So there's no way they can go south for another access point. They can't go north. They can only go south, which ends up on the corner of Eisenhower and 49th, which is a terrible intersection because you're on top of Penny Hill. I can see accidents terribly happening on there. If you're going down Penny Hill and traveling on Eisenhower, so you're going east into town, it's a huge hill. And you have farm equipment coming on these hills. They're at the top of that hill and you got someone coming out of this access point on Eisenhower. Who's gonna stop? That tractor, that baler, it's hard to stop those units on this gravel road. Granted, the Eisenhower was widened probably, 15 years ago, and it is easy for 2 vehicles to get through, but not when you have a agriculture equipment like that. So my real huge concern is agriculture, that we're taking away the look of the land, the opportunity for an agriculture person to continue their operation, because we keep, little by little, we keep taking away here, we take it away there. I just would like to see it stay where it is. I know there's development happening everywhere around, but Norfolk does not have the people in this community to support 22 homes that would support this type of a subdivision, because of the amount of the median wages of Norfolk is not able to support $250,000 homes on a lot, on a new septic tank, on a new well, and everything else. So I'm just concerned that the last planning commission, the guy said Norfolk's moving that way. I don't agree with it. If you drive out east of town, you see where Norfolk's moving with houses and apartment buildings and stuff like that, those are probably needed in Norfolk, the apartment buildings, the not lower income, but the smaller income homes. I don't believe that it's needed out where we're at, because like I said, I love the agriculture. So that's all I had. And
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions?
That's
That-
all pasture land, is that correct?
Yes, it's been pastures. I've lived there 35 plus years. I actually know the Roshes because my husband's family, grandfather, and them were about the same age, and they lived, well, Roshes used to live just like 2 miles down the road from my in-laws' parents. So the Roshes have been involved in agriculture forever and ever.
And that's about what, 90 acres or so? Plus?
I think it was 90 some
How
acres.
many cow-calf pairs will 90 acres?
Well, I think it was kind of split up, because like I said, Penny Hill is a huge hill. So a lot of that couldn't really be, well, a lot of it's into trees and stuff, so it probably hasn't been pastured land for long. But I would say it could suffice 30 pair cow-calf for the summer, but you're also talking only a few months. You're not talking 12 months out of the year. Pasture you got to let grow up and get grass on stuff. So it's not, so that's why it's hard for farmers to find pasture land, because so many of them are broke up for this and that, and you're only needing them for 3-4 months out of a year. So it's not, and most of the time it sat empty. Well, it was a huge hill. We slid on it, you go down with sleds and stuff. It was just that type of a hill. Penny Hill's and I don't know how it got the name Penny Hill, but it's always been that's why I refer to it as Penny Hill. But
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Lynn.
Yep.
Appreciate you being here. This is a public hearing, so anyone else wishing to make comment can do so now.
Hello.
Good evening.
My name is Doreen Temperley. We live, my husband and I, on 49th and Eisenhower at the corner, on the south of the access road. Olson's are on the north. Before I start, can you guys tell me if this is in city jurisdiction right now? Yes?
Within the 2 mile.
Okay. My biggest thing is the cost of this. And what regulations are in the RR zoning. Are people still going to be able to have animals in there? Are they if there's complaints with the cow-calf operation where the cows are getting weaned, what kind of protection do we have against people complaining? The smell, whatever, it's agricultural right across the fence. We do have a problem with the access road. I know somebody stated, oh, that'll ease up the traffic on Eisenhower, but like Lynn said, the road is terrible going north, and our road right outside our property is really bad. So our problem is who's gonna, are the people in the area, are any of us gonna be liable for any of the cost in putting in this division? Now, we hear that it's gonna be paved. Okay, what if, I don't know what the regulations are for pavement. If the pavement doesn't hold up and they gotta redo it, who's gonna pay, who's gonna be charged for the cost? Other people have complained of the water pressure and whether or not it is in city's jurisdiction, who's gonna guarantee that the wells will go in, nobody's gonna have to get be made to hook onto city water? And at what cost is that gonna be if we are made to hook onto city water? Who's responsible for the roads on Eisenhower? Who's responsible for one access road coming out on Eisenhower? You've got more traffic. You don't not only have 22 houses, you've got mom and dad's car, you got the kids' car, all the friends' cars. Our biggest complaint is that we are going to be charged with some of the costs when this thing is all said and done. Karmazine's got his money, he's gone, so who's gonna come up and for the cost? And what kind of money is there? Is there restrictions on the housing? Is there a certain amount? Are they going to be $250,000 houses? Are they going to be $100,000 houses? How much are our taxes going to go up? And I know that's why you probably wanted 50 houses in there instead of 22 houses. So if you guys can guarantee that there ain't going to cost any of us anything, our attitude might change a little. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions?
Oh, another thing. I think people would have had more stuff to say in the first meeting, but it was like it was a COVID thing going on. We got sent out this letter, which was, it was misleading. And when I say misleading, all this information on here was about townships and all this stuff. And it was talking about 16-acre lots. So a lot of us thought, oh, 16 acres, that won't be so bad. And if we would have known, you sent out all this information on directions, if you guys would have put on here that it was actually virtual, it probably wouldn't be here right now, this whole discussion, because people would have called in. So next time, and I know there's no virtual anymore, but it would have been nice if we would have known it was virtual.
This is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to make comment can do so now.
I am Tracy Olson, and I am west on the 14 acres from the proposed subdivision. I guess I'm just looking
Tracy,
for...
can we have you sign in on
Oh.
the form in front of you, please? Thank you.
I guess I'm just looking for clarity and maybe reassurance. I had contacted Brian Bruckner from the NRD because I'm really super concerned about 22 wells, knowing that the quality of our well has been a little bit touch and go as far as shocking it, treating it. There's just some iron bacteria that we have to deal with constantly. And so I was just sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, what does that look like for 22 more wells in this area? So when I had contacted Brian, he thought he would, do some investigations into this. And he contacted Val, and she had stated it was within city jurisdiction for the well portion. And so I guess I'm just wondering if there's a drought, what does that look like? I mean, who do I contact? If my water runs dry and I can't help my family and there's no water for a while, then who do I call? I'm just really confused on the boundaries and the responsibility and the liability. And so that's really where I'm coming from mostly. And then I know that you all have my letter too. So I was just curious about that.
I would just break in and ask staff to comment on the context of conversations regarding water infrastructure, wells in this case, individual wells in this case, and impact on users within the development and potentially beyond, and how far those conversations went with the developer over the last few months. Either Val or Steve can comment on that.
Mayor, council, in conversation with the developer with regard to wells and the density, that was just kind of part of the conversation that we had with them as we looked at their proximity to city limits. They're within a half a mile, so as we continue to grow, that first half mile is going to be some of the areas we grow into. At 22, average 2.5 residents per parcel, and daily draw, you're looking at about 5,500. Sure, I'll pull my mask off here. With 22 parcels, average density per parcel just nationally is 2.5. It could be more. Based on average consumption within the community, you're looking at somewhere in that 5,500 gallons per day draw. That's a fairly minor amount. When you look at an egg well, it might be drawing 750 gallons a minute to 1,000 gallons a minute. We're looking at 5,500 gallons over a day. And that would encompass 100% of the city's consumption, so all of our industrial and commercial consumption would be included in that calculation that we do. So from the perspective of quantity, I don't see any reason to be concerned about quantity. As they would deal with their well and work with their well drillers, we don't get too involved in terms of the quality that they're pulling from there. That's kind of up to the developer to place their wells and determine where the quality water is on site. We would certainly encourage them to put the wells as deep as they can. I think that was the comment that came back from the state. Again, they didn't have any concern about quality or quantity per se. They, in terms of just being as protected as they could against drought, the deeper the better. So again, from a quantity quality perspective, I'm not real concerned about quantity. It's a pretty small amount of water to pull out of the ground. The quality, like I say, we don't get that involved in the quality of private wells.
Who would impose the regulations on that? Who would oversee the developer for that, to make sure that that's accurate?
That would be between the developer and his well person.
And do you know if it's a limited aquifer
Is it a limited aquifer?
in that area?
I'm not aware that that's a limited aquifer. That's within the aquifer that we pull from. I don't know that we've done any specific drilling up in that area of our aquifer, but we've got a pretty strong aquifer. When you look at our plume, the plume of our aquifer is right up through that area.
So Steve, basically what I just heard was Norfolk's close enough to it that it would have more of an impact on where she's at versus the 22 ounces in the case of a drought.
Yeah, and any egg wells pulling out of there are going to have a much more significant pull on that than the 22 residences would.
Okay. The second part is the wildlife, and I know that when I sent the email with the letter that was one of my main concerns. And so I just want to make sure that due diligence is given to make sure that anything in its natural habitat is respected and the ecological system is not disrupted. And so that was another concern I had. And so I would like to know who would oversee that as well, if anybody knows. Would the city or EPA or the developer would work with somebody? I don't know. Just wondering.
You mean in terms of any wildlife impact analysis?
Yeah, there are several species out there. So I just want to make sure that everybody does their due diligence.
I think and Val, you can chime in if you'd like. Any development of this sort, any special or particular environmental analysis would be an oversight of the Nebraska Department of Energy and Energy and Environment, correct?
Yeah, that would go through some state department. That's not something that the city looks at.
I did contact the Nebraska Department of Environmental Services and the EPA to make sure that the developer would be working with them. So.
Okay.
Is there anything out there on the endangered species list?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have that list if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah. If she has reached out to DEE and to EPA, if there are concerns, we've had developments here in the past where they have reached out to us based on local contact, and we've worked with them to either identify and resolve any concerns that they would have. Typically, those are on I'm going to say larger, more dense subdivisions where we're putting in 4 houses per acre or something like that. But I would just say if she has reached out to them, and I believe she has, if they would find any concern, they would contact us.
And I also just reiterate what the other speakers have said about the roads. They're horrible. And we are a part of that easement road where you would go out west and, you go out on that road and it's very minimum maintenance. And we're one of the last areas to get scooped out with snow, which is fine. It's just really hard to drive unless you have adequate vehicles, and even then. And so that was another major concern I have, is safety. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Mayor and Council, if I may, I'll kind of address some of the comments here from the last two. With regard to connection to city water, city sewer. So these would be going in with private wells, private sewer, septic systems. There is a water main that runs in Eisenhower, but until we would come through there with city sewer and improve city water infrastructure to the point we had pressure to serve residences, there would be no connection required until the other lots that are around there, until those lots decide to subdivide and sell off and go into redevelopment or subdivision redevelopment. I wouldn't see any city water, city sewer coming out into that area that would start to drive that conversation. In terms of Eisenhower itself, that is a county road. It'll stay a county road. The county looks at their road infrastructure on an annual basis. As we grow as a city and get kind of stretch out there a ways, they start to improve their city streets. So I would certainly expect, and I do believe there has been some contact with the county, and I think they're starting to think about when's going to be the appropriate time to pave for both 49th and Eisenhower there and kind of close that 2-mile stretch in. But I don't think they haven't reached out to me. We haven't had any conversation around that. But I do know that I think one individual said they had contacted the county, and again, I do think the county is starting to put some thought around how they might extend their hard surface. Street reconstruction. Once the developer puts his street in, if that street infrastructure was to go into disrepair, once the street is there, if we have to come back in and repair that or reconstruct that for some reason, that is done at our cost. Reconstruct once the street's there, there's no assessment to any local homeowners for reconstruction purposes. There's been some conversation here on the easement, and Val, if you could zoom in on that easement area a little bit. The easement exists really specifically to provide access to Elvin Schuer property, which is that property right there. Steve Carmezine's great aunt, she owns that 60-foot in fee, and as they have parceled out parcels, they have parceled out, you know, the parcels to the north and the parcel to the southwest there, but they have retained that 60 feet. That Sure property had to have that easement in order to have access to a public street, so that's the function of that easement there, but it is not an easement in terms of Steve Carmazine. He would own that in fee.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
I'm Kenneth Porter. I own the land that joins this right on the north. And I'm for this project to go forward. Not many times we get projects like this where they're going to pave the road in and really do something good. As far as the water is concerned, we don't have any trouble with our well. We have good water, and I don't think they'll have any problem with that. As far as the county roads are county roads, and that road ain't any worse than all the other county roads all over. If them people that live out there think that road's gonna get paved by there, probably not. My road's not gonna get paved. You're just not gonna be able to see all these roads getting paved. And so I think that's what they're driving at. The road ain't no good because it ain't paved. Well, you ain't gonna see it get paved. One thing on this, I see through the design, they're talking about putting a roundabout on Eisenhower. Any of you guys seen that?
No, there's no roundabout on Eisenhower. There is a roundabout internal to the subdivision.
It was.
It's internal to the subdivision. It's probably right below the Sure property in that north
What I seen
southeast
was
corner.
on Eisenhower, but what the county had. But anyway, I'd be opposed to a roundabout.
Yeah, no.
And not that
Don't start creating new ones here, Kenny.
What?
Don't start creating new ones that aren't proposed.
Okay.
We talk enough about the ones that are proposed.
But our companies did the dirt work on every roundabout here, so I'm not opposed to it, but I just don't think that Eisenhower, I hope they're not gonna put one on Eisenhower, but I hope this goes forward. I know some of the residents aren't happy about it, but usually that's always the case. But I think they're gonna do a good job. They get a road paved in there, it'll be nice homes, and I think it's a real plus for Norfolk and for the future. And there is water by there. If they ever eventually get pressure, they could get water into there, I think. But anyway, so I think you should vote for it. Thank you.
Mr. Porter, you obviously understand the soil. That's the business you're in out there. What kind of soil is out there?
What's this now?
You understand the soil because you work with that all the time.
Yeah.
So what kind of soil, do you know what that area has? What kind
Well,
of soil that is?
That particular, it does have some sand on top, but it's a good solid, there's no wet ground, or it's a good ground to dig basements in and have houses, and it's good to pave in through. So it's pretty good soil.
Any idea how it worked for a septic system?
With what?
How it works for a septic system?
Oh, yeah, that would be no problem there either. Of course, they got big enough lots, so that's gonna be no problem whatsoever, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But I just think it's really gonna be a good addition to the town.
Anyone else wishing to make comment? Hearing no one else, Planning Commission report, please.
The Norfolk Planning,
Nope, sorry, okay.
Hello, my name is Nick Hoffman with McClory Engineering. I'm the engineer on the project. And you had some questions about the septic system. And I've been designing them for 20 years, and this type of ground typically you don't have any issues with. It has nice slope. It drains well. Like Ken said, there's a little bit of sand, but for the most part, it's a good soil to put a septic system on. I guess any other engineering question had just come up, if any of you guys had any, that's all I really had to say.
Topography also plays a role in the septic system too. I mean, you're up high enough to where you gotta dig deeper to get to water. I think his concern is if it would burst or leak, is gonna get to the wells. Is that what you're asking, Fred?
Well, that and just that many, with all that perking going on, that's my concern, that we're closer to the wellhead protection area for the city. And there's that many septic systems, you know, I just kind of count houses as I look on this, and there's not that many. And so I guess I'm trying to get some comfort here, plus there's a water or drainage way that runs right through the middle of this, or part of it, by the looks of it, just what I've seen with my eyes. I'm trying to get some comfort level there.
I mean, based on the Nebraska Department of Environmental and Quality, they do allow for this density. So, I mean, that's what we have to gauge it on, is their requirements of what's allowable. And that's why we went for this density and not a higher density or lower density. This is based on their requirements is what we're looking at, so.
Okay.
And, any other questions?
On that wildlife question, on a development like this, do you typically have to submit some kind of environmental impact analysis? And if so, to whom?
I mean, we submit our plans for any grading we have to do to the department for erosion control. And then inside their department, if they see a need for that, they would forward it on to whatever department they would see fit to do it. They do get a copy of the plans, and like I said, if they have any input from the public, you know, they take that into account, and they might come out and take a visit and see if there's any mitigation that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And we did, when we did do the layout, we looked at the topography of the land. I mean, we had a couple different sites and road configurations, and we looked at what was out there to try to minimize what we were gonna do to impact that drainage channel. And that's why we didn't have a loop kind of along the bottom, because we're gonna have to put a bridge or kind of a big culvert and do a lot of filling. So that's what we looked at when we did this layout, to try to minimize what the impact to the land was, and to provide, you know, an aesthetic homeowner, you know, experience out there that you're not disrupting the land. I mean, your impact would be minor, that you would still have the beauty of what's out there, because it's a very nice kind of rolly topography with some trees.
I do have a couple of quick questions. Water quality, have you done any testing at all on the water in that area?
For the wells?
Yeah.
No, we have not.
No testing. The stormwater collection site, you do have one, or we have multiple? And like for the 96 acres, would one be suffice, or do you need to have one in that area?
For a detention pond you're talking?
Yeah, of course.
There is a natural kind of pond at the southern end of the property, and then there's a culvert that discharges the water. Once we get farther enough along to get into the engineering design, we will look at what's the proper amount of storage, if we need to put any type of metering device on that existing culvert so the water going out would not be more than what historically is.
Because if you're having paved roads, obviously you need some runoff, don't you?
Yeah, there will be some. I mean, we're gonna have culverts, and we're gonna design a stormwater conveyance system.
Okay.
It's gonna be more open channels with some culverts underneath the road to get the water to drain properly.
So with that detention pond, area on the southern end of the development. I mean, that's gonna affect a couple of the lots there, right? As far as their surface area that they would have that would not have water on it. Cause they have to be they're 3 to 5 acres.
So lot 20 and
19 and lot 18, I was just kinda thinking that's kinda where that,
I mean, part of those lots do have that natural pond in there as, you know, as a feature that, you know, as an added feature, in my opinion, that you have a water feature on your property, and, so, I mean, it's gonna be included as part of those lots. I mean, it's not gonna be a common area that gets excluded, it have to be.
so to follow the state guidelines, then you'll make sure that or whoever builds there, I guess, and the developer, that any septic system affluent perk area is back like it's supposed to be from surface water, correct?
Any septic system has to follow that.
Sure. Thanks.
Just a couple items. So one of the reasons we like to stay at the 3 acres is that from an engineering perspective, any septic systems are just managed by a licensed installer. The state regs do allow you to go smaller than 3 acres, but you have to engage an engineer at that point. It becomes more of an engineered design where you have to account for the failure of your leach field and plan in a secondary leach field. There's other things that get involved. So by staying at the 3 acres from an engineering perspective, it's up to the state at that point and the installer. Because of the 3 acres as well, and just the proximity to Eisenhower, there is some natural retention on site that's been, well, natural man-made retention on site. But we also have the directly downstream at Eisenhower. You've got a restriction there at Eisenhower that basically functions as downstream control or upstream control, depending on how you want to look at it for runoff. As a function of the 3 acres as well, from a residential build-out perspective and the amount of hard space, impervious space you see from a residence and driveway and so forth, it's pretty minor compared to a 3 acre site. So as that runs off site, it pretty much just is absorbed by the land itself.
Okay. Any further questions for Nick? Thank you. Again, this is a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to make comment?
I had asked before about the RR zoning. What's the regulations?
What do you mean?
Can people have horses? Can they have any livestock?
Val, can you help us out on that, please?
So outright permitted uses in RR is just housing, but people can ask for animals. And so that would be a conditional use permit, and it depends on the size of the lot as to how many they could potentially have with the conditional use permit.
So, what's gonna be the criteria for allowing horses?
Where are my horses? So generally speaking, in the conditional use permit, we talk about the building structures, that horses shall not be located closer than 100 feet to any property line. And then, if I can find it, I'm pretty sure that it's 1 per 2 acres. If I can find it quick.
It's an acre. Val, I looked it up.
It's what?
It's 1 per acre.
Oh, not 1 per 2 acres?
You can't have one unless you have 2 acres or more. but then it's 1 horse per acre, what I read today.
Okay. So with this, permit or whatever, do the neighbors have to agree to that, or do they have any say, the people that live in this 22 acre, or the 22 houses? Are they have any say? I don't want to live next to somebody that's got a horse.
I think she's asking, is it a permitted use or is it conditional use?
It's all conditional use for what would be the new lots, because there are zoned. So if somebody wants to have a horse or a cow, something like that, they would have to come to the planning commission and go through the public hearing process. And we would notify people within that 300 feet, just like what we did for the zone change public hearing now. And the neighbors could come and say, they're fine, they're not fine, just like the process we're going through tonight. And then it would be up to the planning commission to decide whether they would want to give that conditional use permit or not.
Mrs. Temperley, were you maybe asking if you could have a horse? Or
I do
the
have a
Olsons?
horse.
But you're zoned ag, right?
I know, but my
Just was wanting to make
concern is, the people that would be right next to us,
Mhm.
if they complain, can they complain?
I think
or-
you're zoned ag, is that correct, Val? She's zoned
Yes,
ag.
she is zoned ag at, what,
Is that
15,
like
20 acres?
grandfathered in, or?
Essentially, yes. So, the way it is now, these lots out here currently are not large enough for ag zoning, but they are grandfathered in, so they're at what's considered a non-standard use. And so as long as that use continues and doesn't stop for more than a year, it just continues on.
Okay, so if it, and that's for any livestock, horses, cows?
Correct.
Okay, so as long as we have a horse on there for continuing, not more than a year absent, we're okay.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, I guess another question is, what's the restrictions or the regulations on the houses? Is it gonna be
What's your
another
question?
Woodland Park thing?
You wanna ask Mr. Karmazine, Your Honor?
Are you asking for what are the dollar amounts that they can do?
This,
What are-
Yeah,
the-
what
are they-
there are no,
Trailer house in there, or
there,
Yeah,
Are there any,
the developer-
there's gotta be
Maybe the
rules
developer
somewhere,
could
somebody's
answer
got
that.
rules.
So we can have single-family residential and manufactured home dwellings. So you can essentially have those houses that come in pieces that are built in factories and put together. But there's no size limit necessarily that you can't have a 2,000 square foot house or 650 square feet's the smallest we can go. If somebody wants that, they could have that too. But otherwise, we do not put conditions on what can and can't go out there.
Okay, so as long as it's just a one family,
Correct, yeah.
Okay. that's all I have.
any other comments?
I'll just address that real quick. There are covenants that are kind of going through the stages of drafting at this point. It's not finalized, but there is a minimum square footage on the house size. There are the covenants fall in line pretty similar to some of the other acreage subdivisions on that western side of town. There's nothing absolute at this point, just because we're still trying to work on getting some of those resolved, but they are fairly restrictive and protective, just because of the fact that when you put this type of a financial investment into a development of this size, and given the fact that as I said before, this whole thing came about because my wife and I wanted to move out there, and with us hopefully living out there if this goes through, it's obviously a development that I am gonna want to live in. You know, so the covenants are going to be shaped to be fairly protective and pretty restrictive as far as what goes out there, so that it's aesthetically pleasing as well. So.
Are you saying that
Ma'am, you can't if you have a further comment, which you've been up 3 times now, so this will be it, you have to make it from the podium.
so what's the square foot minimum? You said there was a square foot
In
minimum, right?
regulation, I don't, Val, is
In
is
the
there such a
covenant.
thing?
Weren't you talking about covenants?
That would be up to the developer's covenants.
And what is the square foot on the development?
He said they were looking into it to determine.
They've
what
not,
it would be.
those have not been finalized.
Okay, is there any, what's gonna determine the tax revenue off of this thing then? The amount of money each house is worth, or?
Property tax is determined by the county.
The county assessor's office,
Yep.
through the valuation process. Any other comments? Hearing none. Planning Commission report, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 6, 2021, at the request of Virginia Roche to consider a zoning change from A, Agricultural District, to RR, Rural Residential District, on property generally located 1/4 mile east of the intersection of North 49th Street and West Eisenhower Avenue. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the request with an 8-0 vote.
With that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 30. I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5729, approving a zoning change from A to RR on property generally located 1/4 mile east of the intersection of North 49th Street and West Eisenhower Avenue.
I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5729.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion, council, or comments? Hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
With that, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5729 carries on first reading.
Val, was there a note on moving the plat and the zone request together?
Yes, so since no one made the motion to suspend on second and third to pass, and it just passed on first reading tonight, we will actually need to pull number 31, the plat, and then that will be moved to the next agenda when we hear the second.
Or is there a motion for suspending the rules? If not, we need to skip item 31.
Yep, we'll put that on next planning commission
Okay.
when we see the second one again.
It moves us to item number 32. Open this public hearing for the mayor and city council to sit as a board of equalization to levy a special assessment against property located at 1109 West Nebraska Avenue for demolition of a structure. To begin, I will look for a motion to adjourn as the mayor and council and convene as the board of equalization.
Your Honor, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Okay, this will open the public hearing for some background on this. Brianna, please.
Thank you. The structure located at 1109 West Nebraska Avenue was condemned in March of 2020 and then demolished in September of that year at a total cost of $13,120.01. We billed the property owner for the cost of the demolition on December 23rd, 2020, and as of today, no payment has been received. Following adoption of the resolution to levy a special assessment, a lien is filed against the property, and interest accrues in the same manner as other special assessments. And this is the usual and customary way the city uses to assure payment.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. Any questions? This is a public hearing. If anyone wishes to make comment, they can do so now. Hearing no one, I will close the hearing and look for a motion to adjourn as the Board of Equalization and reconvene as mayor and council.
Make the motion.
Second.
Motion second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 33, I would look for a motion to consider resolution number 2021-12, levying a special assessment in the amount of $13,120.01 against the property at 1109 West Nebraska Avenue in Norfolk, Nebraska for demolition of a structure.
All right, present resolution number 2021-12.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, resolution 2021-12 is adopted.
Item 34 on the regular agenda, I'd look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5730, authorizing issuance of various purpose bonds for permanent financing of paving districts 510, 511, 513, 516, and 518, gap paving districts for 514 and 515, water districts 120 through 123, sewer districts 249 and 251 and 252, and sidewalk districts 2017-1, 2018-1, and 2019-2, and the principal amount not to exceed $3,600,000.
I'd offer for consideration ordinance number 5730.
Second.
Motion and second, and for some background on this, Randy Gates, our city finance officer, please.
Yes, Your Honor. There's for bond anticipation, note issues outstanding for those districts that you just mentioned. The first one of these matures June 1st, so we need to be getting permanent financing in place fairly quickly. All but 55,000 of those will be paid off with proceeds of this bond issue, plus cash on hand in the special assessment district. We assessed 4 of those districts at the March 1 council meeting. They have 50 days to pay without interest, and the first installment comes due in 50 days. They also get a discount if they pay within 50 days. So we expect we'll get a substantial amount of cash here within the next several days that can also go to be applied towards paying off those bond anticipation notes. So at this time, we don't know exactly what the size of the issue will be. I expect it'll be closer to $3 million than $3.6 million, but as I say, we don't know that for sure yet. We're going to be doing this as a competitive sale with Piper Sandler acting as the city's financial advisor, and Bruce Leffler's here with Piper Sandler tonight, and he can help answer questions along with myself. Maturity is planned for not to exceed 20 years. I expect will be 19 years, and then we'll have a 5-year call. I recommend passage on all 3 readings since, as I said, we need to get money in our hands by June 1st to pay off the first of these bond anticipation notes.
Okay, thank you. Randy, any questions? Hearing none, short title, please.
An ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation various purpose bonds, Series 2021, of the city of Norfolk, Nebraska, in the principal amount of not to exceed $3,600,000 for the purpose of financing or refinancing the cost of constructing street improvements in paving district numbers 510, 511, 513, 516, and 518, and gap paving district numbers 514 and 515, sidewalk improvements in sidewalk district numbers 2017-1, 2018-1, and 2019-2, sewer improvements in sewer extension district numbers 249, 251, and 252, and water improvements in water extension district numbers 120, 121, 122, and 123, prescribing the form of said bonds, providing for the levy and collection of taxes to pay the same, authorizing the officers of the city to award the sale of the bonds to the bidder providing the most favorable bid to the city at a public sale, authorizing officers of the city to make arrangements for the sale of the bonds and to designate the final terms, rates, and maturity schedule for said bonds within stated parameters, and providing for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5730 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5730 on second and third.
Second.
Motion second to suspend the rules and approve on second and third readings. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance number 5730 carries on second and third.
Item 35 would entertain a motion to consider resolution number 2021-13, calling $867,000 of outstanding Series 2018 bond anticipation notes, $1 million of outstanding Series 2018 B bond anticipation notes, $1,795,000 of outstanding Series 2018 C bond anticipation notes, and $2,805,000 of outstanding Series 2019 bond anticipation notes for redemption on or around June 1st, 2021.
Your Honor, I'll make that motion for consideration of resolution number 2021-13.
Second.
Motion second, and Randy, could you again give us some background on this, please?
Yes, this is simply the second step of the follow-on step to what you just approved. That's calling the notes that will be paid with those bond proceeds.
Okay. Very good. Any questions? Discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, resolution 2021-13 is adopted.
Item 36 would look for a motion to consider resolution number 2021-14, adding 2 stop signs to control traffic at Cooper Drive and South 25th Street and Taylor Avenue and South 25th Street, south of Highway 275. Also adding a yield sign at the intersection of Taylor Avenue and Cooper Drive.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion for consideration of resolution number 2021-14.
Second that.
Motion second to give us some background on this. Chief Don Miller, Norfolk Police Division.
Mayor and Council, this is part of the addition for Midwest Bank on the southwest corner of 25th and Highway 275. They've been working on it for a while. They're getting to the point where they're ready to open up those roads for some traffic. This is just putting 2 stop signs, stopping traffic on 25th Street. There should be a map included in your packet, and a yield making Cooper Drive the through street. Pretty straightforward, because it's 25th Street main thoroughfare. We need to have some stop signs there.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Any questions?
My only question would be why a yield sign?
It's, without a yield sign, a T intersection is considered an uncontrolled intersection, so you have to yield to the right. Because of the makeup of the roadway, that's going to appear as if Cooper is a through street. And if somebody on Cooper failed to yield, then they should be yielding. There would be an NFL accident. This clarifies that Cooper is a through street. You bet.
Good idea.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, resolution 2021-14 is adopted.
Item 37, I'd look for a motion to consider approval to award a contract to Rutgens Construction Incorporated of Tilden, Nebraska for the 4th Street Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project for an amount of $1,119,546.85.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Motion second, and Steve Ramus, Public Works Director, background on this, please.
Mayor and Council, we received bids to replace a fairly significant stretch of 30-inch sanitary sewer main here in the community. This is a major feed at the lower end of the system that feeds our plant. We're very pleased to get 4 bids on this. Those bids, the bid numbers are attached to the agenda item. You can see they range anywhere from a low bid at a little over 1.1 million to a high at 2.2 million. So almost a 100% spread there between the high and the low. Rutchins is the low bid contractor. They're currently working on the water main on South 81, which we would anticipate them to move directly from that to this somewhere around midsummer. So I'm very pleased to see the bids, and I think it certainly helps maintain our sewer fund.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions?
What's the timeline for completion once they start?
8 to 12 weeks, just depending on weather conditions and so forth, once they start.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And no concerns with the quality with Rutchins for almost 800,000 less?
Engineer's estimate was 1.3 million. So I think what we have here is we had 3 people that were willing to put a bid in, but they were all busy. If they got it, they got it. Rutchins, just kind of working in the community right now and able to move from one to the other. But it was, when you look at their Olson's estimate at 1.3 million, the 1.2 was very close to engineer's estimate.
That's where I was going, Steve, with my question. Was there $800,000 left on the table, and if there's any concern of anything missed with Rutchins' quote compared to the second bidder?
No, we're very satisfied.
We see that a lot with these bids. Sure.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, with Jackson absent. Motion carries.
Moves us on to the final item, number 38, under administrative reports. Presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2020, along with the related auditor's letter. And for that, Randy Gates, our city finance officer. Randy.
Yes. A year ago at this time, we were just starting to wrestle with the pandemic. We were expecting a big financial hit from the pandemic. Many businesses were closed or drastically altering their way of doing business. Traffic was way down. You'd look at some of the streets that you'd normally expect to have lots of traffic on and not see a car. Most cities around the state and county were expecting large reductions in revenue, and we were no exception. We were putting the budget together in May and June, we were seeing big revenue drops. Sales tax we received in June, reflecting April sales, was down 11.5% from the prior year. Keno revenue for May was down over 50% from the prior year, and our highway allocation for June was down almost 20%. Hotel occupation tax was down over 60% in May. Food and beverage occupation tax was down over 27%. Things indeed looked really bleak at that point in time, and we didn't know if it was going to continue sliding down or get better. At that point, we were afraid it may continue to slide down. When we put our budget together for this year we're in now, the 2021 budget, we're showing general fund beginning balance going down over $500,000, and ending balance going down $750,000. So we were expecting a bad year for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2020 that this comprehensive annual report reflects. Thankfully, shortly after we put together the budget, things started turning around. The DHMs were eased up in mid-May, although it took a couple months for that to flow through and show on our financial statements. We were having really good revenues in the year before the pandemic hit. We had a couple months of really bad revenues, and then as the DHMs lifted, our revenues took off again, and for the year in total, we have a good year. For instance, if you look at our largest general fund revenue source, which is sales tax, it's up over 8% from the prior year as of April 2020. And that was before we had the impact of the pandemic. Then we had that 2 big months of reductions. And then with the easing of the DHMs, we ended up with sales tax actually up fairly significantly. If you look at the statement of activities on page 34 of the comprehensive annual financial report, which is page 277 in your agenda packets, the sales tax actually increased for the year, going from about 8.7 million last year to 9.2 million this year. I'm sure we'd had a much bigger sales tax increase absent the pandemic, but with the pandemic, we still had a nice increase. Even Keno revenue increased, going from about $622,000 last year to $664,000 this year. For the DHMs in place, like the pandemic, I expected our revenue to decline to almost nothing. It never did. Even during the height of the pandemic, we were getting in from a third to half of the revenue we got in the year before, which that was a major shock to me. However, not all of our revenue sources were up for the year. Interest income took the biggest hit. It went down from $865,547 last year to $550,164 this year. Interest rates fell rapidly during the pandemic. Yield on one-year treasuries went from over 1.5% early in 2020 to almost nothing now. And currently the yield on one-year treasuries is 6 basis points or 0.06%. And the drop was real quick. By early March 2020, one-year treasury rates were under 0.5%. By early May, they were only 20 basis points, and they continued down through the rest of the year. As you can also see, our occupation tax is down from $2,965,012 last year to $2,869,551 this year. Food and beverage occupation tax about broke even for the year, but our lodging occupation tax is down about $80,000 from the prior year. Overall, the city's general revenues actually increased slightly, going from $23,023,131 prior year to $23,145,190 in the current year. Normally, that's not something I would be real pleased with, that almost flat revenue, but with the pandemic, I'm quite pleased to see that our revenues actually went up a little bit instead of declining a whole lot, which is what we feared at this time last year. I'm going to shift my focus from general revenues to the city's program revenues and expenses at the top half of the statement of activities. The top part of the statement of activities of various government functions are listed down the left-hand column, such as public safety, library, and solid waste. The expenses on a full accrual basis, including depreciation, are in the next column for each of those functions. Public safety was the largest expense at $11.3 million. This is the expense of police, fire, emergency management activities. The next three columns are program revenues derived from operation of these functions, broken down into three categories. The first is charges for services, and continue to use public safety as an example. You'll see there was $900,867 of charges for services for public safety. About $600,000 of this is ambulance charges. Also in that number of fees paid by the Rural Fire District and 911 fees paid by Stanton County and Hoskins, among other things. Operating grants and contributions for public safety was $664,920, and those are things such as the Municipal Finance Organization revenue and funding from other cities for things such as SNARE and Region 11, and we also get our wireless 911 funds allocated from the state in that number. Net public safety expense after deducting related revenue was almost $9.7 million. In total, the city's net cost of governmental activities was about $50 million, comprised of $33 million of expenses, offset by $2.9 million of charges for services, $8.5 million of operating grants, and contributions for capital of $6.7 million. This compares to a net cost of governmental activities last year of $18.9 million, which is a decrease of about $3.9 million. And when you look at that statement of activities, you'll see something kind of unusual there. Normally you'd expect the governmental activities to all show negative. You don't expect to make money on police or fire or public works. This year, Public Works actually shows that they had a net positive of $2.4 million net revenue. The year before, they showed what you'd expect, net expense of $2.8 million. So that's about a $5.2 million swing in net expenses or revenue for Public Works. And that swing is caused primarily by $4.4 million increase in capital grants and contributions, which went from less than $1.3 million last year toward $5.7 million this year. These are capital contributions for new streets dedicated to the city by developers or special assessments for the streets. For example, new streets dedicated to the city last year were in Norfolk, Midwest Bank Subdivision, Legacy Bend 3rd Edition, and Bradford Business Park. Special assessments included 15th Street and Legacy Bend 2nd Edition. Immediately below program revenues and expenses for the governmental activities is program revenues and expenses for the business type activities. And you'd normally expect these to have a net revenue because you're trying to set rates to recover your cost for those. And our business type activities consist of our 4 enterprise funds, water, sewer, and solid waste, along with a new one this year, which is stormwater. This is the first year that stormwater shows on the statement of activities. The council implemented a stormwater fee of $1 per month for residential customers and $3 per month for commercial and industrial customers. That began at the beginning of the fiscal year, and these fees generated almost $153,000. First year expenses were about $59,000 resulting in net program revenue of $94,000. Net program for water revenue for water increased $800,000, going from $592,000 last year to $1,395,000 this year. Use fees increased $567,000, primarily due to drier than normal summer, but also because of a 2% rate increase at the beginning of the year. Capital grants and contributions also increased $451,000 due to water mains contributed by developers in new subdivisions, as I discussed previously. Partially offsetting these revenue increases is increased expenses caused by the dry summer. Net program revenue for sewer decreased $466,000, primarily due to a $487,000 increase in expenses. About $192,000 of this was related to fees for the master plan. We also had a sewer maintenance worker along with a 2.5% COLA and a 15% group insurance increase. Net program revenue for solid waste decreases $157,000 due both to a slight increase in expense and a slight decrease in revenue. Overall, net program revenue for the business type activities increased 9% or almost $273,000. As you can see at the bottom of the statement of activities, overall the city's net position increased $6.7 million, going from almost $139 million last year to $145 million at the end of fiscal year 2020. This is much better than I would have expected at this time last year. I would have expected probably the opposite, where we would have decreased. But like I said, things turned around real quickly after the DHMs were relaxed. In addition to the city's financial statements, the comprehensive annual financial report also contains several reports from the auditors. The first is the auditor's report on the city's financial statement on pages 257 to 259 of the agenda packet. This is a clean audit opinion stating the city's financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The city's single audit reports are included at the end of the comprehensive annual financial report beginning on page 371 of the agenda packets. This is the first time in 5 years we've reached a threshold of $750,000 of expenditures of federal awards, which requires a single audit. Single audit requires a lot more intensive review by the auditors of federal grants, and that added $3,000 to our audit fees for the year. The first report contained in this section is the schedule of expenditure of federal awards, and it's on page 372 of the agenda packet. From this, you can see that we're way over the threshold with $1,202,902 of expenditures. $960,000 of these expenditures were for community development block grant programs. The $362,555 of TD or Tourism Development Grant was for the skate park. The 2 CD or Comprehensive Development Grants total $544,342 and were for Brosh Avenue. The DTR grant or Downtown Revitalization Grant expense of $50,244 was for River Point Square and the Facade Improvement Program downtown. We also expended $130,437 related to the 2019 flood, and this was reimbursed through NEMA from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. There are a number of smaller grants for which we expended federal dollars included on that report. The next report is the auditor's report on internal controls, beginning on page 375. It notes no internal control weaknesses or non-compliance with laws, regulations, or contract agreements. The auditor's report on compliance for one major federal program is next, beginning on page 377 in the agenda packets. As I noted, our federal dollars were community development block grant dollars for a large part, and that was the only major program the city had last year. And this report indicates the city complied with the compliance requirements of the Community Development Block Grant Program. The auditor's schedule of findings and question costs begins on page 380 and notes no audit findings or question cost. The final enclosure in the agenda packets is the auditor's letter, which is separate from the comprehensive annual financial report, and it begins on page 383 of the agenda packet. This is a required communication from the auditors and talks about the auditor's responsibilities under generally accepted auditing standards. And it's a clean report, noting no disagreements with management or other difficulties performing the audit. I probably talked way too much already, so I'll stop and answer any questions you might have.
Could you repeat that?
Thank you, Randy, for a very comprehensive report. Each year, our fiscal office is recognized for its excellence in work, and I think you can tell how much goes into the reporting and accounting and number crunching that is involved in running a city. So we appreciate your work, Randy, and your team's work in that regard, and also for the report, which I think it's pretty noteworthy that given all of the challenges of the last year, we finished ahead of the game in terms of revenue, and our best economic indicator of sorts is our sales tax receipts, which finished nearly, I think, 7%.
6-7%.
From the year before. So a good indication in my mind that people here are willing to invest in Norfolk's future growth, and that's a sign of confidence in a growing local economy. So we can be grateful for that. And with that, are there any other questions on the financial report or discussion?
I don't have a question, Mayor. I obviously joke there, but I think it's pretty obvious, and maybe we take it for granted. We're in really good hands with Randy, so excellent.
Thank you for your work. With that, we are adjourned.